So we'll crack on and hopefully others can join us as we're rolling through. So thanks for everyone to joining. Thank you so much for the panelists more than anyone else. Obviously, this year has been a wild ride when it comes to AI, and specifically the use of AI in all things video, from discovery to content creation to monetization. And with the exponential increase in the adoption, there's also been a plethora of different new use cases within media and entertainment, sports, the creator economy, and many more subsegments, which I'm sure we'll delve into shortly. And across that, we've seen a lot of challenges, be it from implementing them through workflows or ethical and legal challenges when it comes to actually adopting AI within those use cases. And then hopefully we'll have a good chunk of time to talk about what's coming next, what's the untapped opportunity that our star-studded panel see on the horizon. And hopefully everyone will learn from this session, me including, so we can take them back to our respective organizations and see where we can actually improve and kind of take this whole AI movement forward. So without further ado, I'll just do a quick introduction of our panelists, but I'll leave it up to them to do a much better job than I can describing their expertise and what they're working on currently. So starting with James Creech, thank you so much for joining. He's founded and sold businesses previously. The one I'm mostly aware of is his influencer marketing platform, which got sold to Brandwatch. And since then, starting multiple other startups within the creator space, including the creator economy jobs and Measure Studios. And I know there is some use cases around AI within those startups, the latter anyway. So it'd be good to delve into that. And we have Melanie Moeller, and she has been working within AI for the last decade or so, with a lot of experience at BBC, utilizing AI for content discovery to automated translation and leading tech innovation teams at Sky. Brett Snellgrove, extensive experience at BBC Studios and Sony Pictures, consulting for many other media organizations around the digital video space, with more scope and focus on AI and video when it comes to content creation lately. And lastly, we have Ben Field, award-winning producer, and he has been working on ethical deepfakes since 2021, using AI for factual content, and also part of multiple AI working groups such as Equity UK and PACT. So if we can take it from there, Ben, maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more for us, and then we'll move to the other panelists before we jump into the crux of this session.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good introduction for me, actually. I'll take that. Yeah, so my interest in this is sort of coming at it from, or initially it was coming at it from, purely a creative outlook of, right, AI is coming, what can we do? And very quickly it became actually AI is coming and it's here, and actually what should we do, which is not necessarily the same as what can we do. So it's a very interesting sort of dynamic at the moment of being very excited about the possibilities, but also looking at what the legal challenges are and what the ethical ramifications are as well, to make sure that the creative industry and certainly the screen media industry doesn't accidentally shaft itself. So we're sort of working across the PACT body and also the Equity Union to make sure that everybody is working towards a goal that means that we have a sustainable industry for years to come. And that's probably a decent overview from that side. But beside that, I am just a creative producer and exec producer and director of factual content. So yeah, that's me. God, that was waffly, wasn't it? Sorry.
Thank you so much, Brett. We can move on to yourself.
For sure. I've had 10 plus years experience working in social media and especially social video, and it is unavoidable to not be learning about, talking about, and using AI. It's hitting every possible area of social and digital video. Just looking at it in terms of what's developing, I think it's really a fascinating time because every month there's some new update. And we are definitely in a bubble at the moment in terms of just all the AI based tools and technology that's out there. So I'm personally really fascinated to learn from everyone on the panelist, and it's really kind of forced me as well to go away and do some research and look at what's been going on in the space. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Mel.
Yeah, hi. It's really great to be here. And yeah, I've been blown away as well with how rapidly the AI and especially generative AI landscape has been changing. I mean, just the models that Stability AI released over the past week, if you haven't, read the news about it, do take a look. Absolutely mind-blowing. And that's just, one of the signs or signals of how quickly the space firstly is moving, but also that we get really high quality, super high fidelity video produced just using text prompts, for example, or an image as input. So I have, as Amir mentioned, I've been working in the video and technology space for more than a decade, using AI for content discovery, content creation, distribution, and specifically have been working with organizations to help them adapt AI in a meaningful way and help them use AI to innovate faster. And that's what I'm doing at the moment as well on a consulting basis. I'm an AI and innovation consultant.
Super, thank you. And James.
Thanks for having me, Amir. Great to be here. So my background is as an entrepreneur and a technologist, right? So we apply AI within Measure Studio, which is a social media analytics company. We leverage computer vision, which is a subset of AI, to analyze what's actually in a piece of content, right? Our thesis is social media platforms have changed, and now because of algorithmic distribution, right, the platforms are determining who to send it to based on all of these signals from your content and the metadata around it. So we help brands, publishers, agencies understand how your content is being interpreted by social platforms and how you can optimize your performance. So excited about the potential for a lot of these AI applications. I'm also a bit of a creator myself, right? Publish on LinkedIn and have a newsletter. And so I've used generative AI tools to help with copywriting at times, though I admittedly have moved away from that. But generative AI art is really powerful and a great tool for creatives. So excited to talk about the applications in video as well as other parts of the creative field.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And for all our attendees, please do submit any questions that you have throughout the session. We'll try and collate them. And if there is time, we'll tackle them towards the end. And if we don't get around in terms of picking your question and answering it, we'll definitely get back to you individually. So if there is any specific people that you want them to answer, just shout out. Otherwise, we'll get back to you on a one-on-one basis. Thank you so much for those introductions and a quick roundup of what you're mostly excited about. And I think that's a really good segue for us to just kind of jump into it. So the agenda primarily for this session was looking at different use cases of AI in video to increase performance, efficiencies, and other areas. So we can start with that because I'm assuming that's probably going to be a big bulk of our conversation today. So starting from James, and we can go in a similar order. We can start with certain use cases that you've seen. Obviously, if there's any specific elements within these use cases that we speak of, which others would like to comment on, please just jump in. It doesn't have to be too structured, but starting with James, where have you seen AI being adopted in the world of video, which has led to kind of significant positive changes compared to the status quo? And in other words, where is the most disruption happening today?
Sure. So when I think about applications in the video space or creator economy more broadly, I tend to think in three buckets, right? There's content creation, there is distribution, audience growth, and then there's monetization. And I think a lot of the AI advancements have happened initially in the content creation space, right? So we have video editing tools, things that can take a long form piece of content and repurpose it or cut it down to be short form or take it from horizontal to vertical video. And that's amazing, right? It's saving people countless hours and giving kind of new life to this content. We've also seen localization, right? Obviously, Papercup is a great example, but other tools and resources that help us automate dubbing or find creative ways to expand the accessibility of video content? How do we take something that was created for just a small audience and kind of amplify that to a broader population is exciting. And now, of course, you've got tools that can create video from scratch, right? Whether that's adapting an image to video, or it's creating entirely new content from a prompt, or sourcing existing video assets and tweaking them. You've got all of these really powerful creation tools as a result of AI improvements. So there's certainly stuff happening in audience growth, distribution, monetization as well, but content creation seems to be where we're seeing this like kind of explosive growth of AI applications.
And would you say some of these elements that you mentioned, specifically around, say, monetization, for instance, they've been quietly being incorporated in different mechanisms for quite some time? So I think when previously we had a quick chat between the team here, we talked about how certain AI elements have been used within search algorithms on YouTube, for instance, or when it comes to actually suggesting specific piece of content. So in terms of us saying that now, because of this AI boom, is starting to be utilized in all these different spaces, where in fact it's been incorporated quite some time ago.
Yeah, artificial intelligence isn't exactly a novel concept, right? We've had different names for it and earlier versions of AI for years. Machine learning, neural networks, right? I mean, you've been interacting with AI for quite some time. You probably just didn't really notice it or maybe fully appreciate it. And I think, you know, what's changed is generative AI tools have become so widespread. I mean, with ChatGPT essentially becoming the fastest consumer product to reach, you know, 100 million users, right, in record time. There's this watershed moment for generative AI, but we've had, you know, things like Spotify and Netflix recommendations, right? These algorithms are using AI and studying a corpus of data and then providing personalization or recommendations tailored to your interests for years. I mean, the magic of TikTok, how does it know me better than, you know, my partner or my family and friends, is because of AI, right? It's learning, you know, your behaviors and what's interesting to you, and it's serving up the best of the internet, kind of curated to your tastes and preferences. So we've had AI for a while. It's just now we're seeing an emergence of new applications.
I love that.
And it's the name's been used a lot as well. And like you said, James, a lot of it is variations of AI, maybe not true AI. And I think that's a big thing. Whether or not it's going to continue to be called AI or not is really interesting to me, because that is the buzzword or the label that everyone's getting attached to at the moment. But I think the monetization side of things is interesting, because if you take YouTube, for example, on the mid-roll monetization side of things, where before you used to want to put in your mid-rolls where you wanted to, now YouTube's got to a point of going, we can detect where to put the best mid-rolls in. You don't have to manually do that. It's already, advertising's where the money is, so YouTube, Facebook, everyone else are using AI to help create creative for ads, but then also using it for targeting as well. So there's lots of innovation happening around that space as well.
Awesome. Maybe we can pass it to some other panelists. Mel, I believe you had some kind of thoughts and use cases which you were quite excited about last time we had a chat. Maybe you can elaborate on some of those, or if there's anything else that you've seen since last week when we spoke.
Yeah, sure. So I really like, Brad, how you mentioned YouTube, because where I've seen a lot of innovation happening, and I'm really excited actually about technology-enabled business models, and that's also where my background sort of lies, is YouTube automation. So you now see creators using AI to run fully automated YouTube channels, and frankly speaking, making a fortune with that, which is quite an interesting model. And I've been thinking about how can organizations actually adopt that model at scale. And that's not to replace humans, but for them to be able to create more, and for humans to focus on the more creative and strategic aspects. And then I guess the second use case that I'm super excited about is sport. And AI has been used in sport for a long time for things like highlights reels, for example. And I'm very passionate about sport myself. And I think there's a huge opportunity to provide more immersive experiences. Is that because sports provides us with a range of data, and whether that's about, using that data obviously in different ways, but whether it's about putting the audience at the center. And when I worked at Sky, we ran some experiments around that, because I think we can move beyond just watching sport on a flat screen. If I want to follow a certain football player, then I should be able to do that and be right at the center of the action. And then also, I think when it comes to sports content, obviously most matches are really long. And I recently ran an experiment where I took a US Open match, which was more than an hour long, and I created a rapid summary using AI and a video analysis around it with an avatar presenter, which took me less than 5 minutes. And I presented that as part of a webinar to sports organizations. And I spent another 5 minutes translating that into different languages and localizing it with actually the avatar presenter looking like they're coming from that particular culture, so that actually the audience can relate. So when I presented that, leaders from sports organizations were actually including, media agencies as well, who focus on sports, they were absolutely blown away. They were saying doing this currently takes us about definitely more than half an hour, between half an hour and an hour, and you did all of this in 10 minutes. That's amazing. So I think there's loads of, opportunity. And I'm aware, Amir, at Papercup, you work on localization, so you really understand the opportunity, and I'm sure you're as excited as I am about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a really good segue in terms of Ben, some of the use cases which we've seen you. I've seen you talk at different stages, and most recently at MIPCOM, where we started, where you were talking about some of the ethical deep fakes, especially that big project that kind of kicked off some of the elements of deep fusion. Do you see the rise of fully synthetic content being kind of kept at the similar kind of pace as the whole generative AI boom? Because what the rest of the team are talking about here is we're moving into that space, having these YouTube channels that Brett mentions, where it's wholly synthetic, including some of these virtual avatars and synthetic voices for localization. What does it look like in your area?
Well, I mean, so we use as much AI as we're able to, but for the purpose of streamlining, really. So, I think there is a difference between what we can do commercially, I suppose, as an entertainment platform. We have a slightly different sort of set of rules and codes that we sort of have to be mindful of, I think, because of the impact that we might accidentally have on the performance industry. So, the idea of having synthetic avatars sort of presenting our content will have huge ramifications within the industry, where there is a huge amount of people who've gone into, years and years of training, and suddenly they realize that actually they could well be out of a job. Well, I think we have a duty of care to our own industry, and we need to be mindful of what that does. However, there are ways where we are using it in ways that we don't really feel is particularly harmful, because it doesn't come, with a particular job loss, if you like. So, for instance, we had a documentary that we were commissioned for at the beginning of October, and the deadline was the second week of October, which was particularly close and particularly scary, given the fact that it was about a topic that I knew nothing about. But yet I still had to produce and write and direct it and churn it out. So, what do? You go to ChatGPT and you ask it a load of prompts, and you hope that it gives you the right answers. And that's actually an interesting point to raise, is the fact that ChatGPT is not flawless. It will give you a load of random information, so you do need to double check your sources at this point. And so, but that does speed up. So I was able to ask it a load of things that I thought that contributors were likely to tell me under interview. And I was able to construct a paper edit of what I thought, we were likely to get back. And of course, we also needed sign off from the commissioner that, that this film was going to do what they wanted it to do. So, the first iteration of this was a paper edit, and it was far too long and so on. So we went, right, actually, how can we present this to the commissioner in a way that they were then going to be able to sign it off, very, very quickly. So bearing in mind that everything I was producing was not for external sort of publishing. So, we wouldn't have done this had it not have been for AI. We wouldn't have been able to. We wouldn't have hired people to come and write for us and things. We'd have just done it ourselves. So what we decided we'd do is I would put each contributor's sort of answer that I'd assigned in the script. I'd assign those to a synthetic voice, and I was able to build an edit basically out of purely synthetic content, which I wouldn't have been able to do. And drop in the archive that we already have. And I was able to deliver that. I think it took me around about, it might have taken 8 to 12 hours or something to sort of from start to finish, which meant that I was able to send this over to the commissioner and for them to look at it, make a few tweaks, actually nothing too horrendous. And then we knew what questions that got signed off. We knew what questions we were going into the real contributors with. And it really sped up our production process. So for that was really, really useful. I think one of the interesting things, actually, Mel, that you just commented on was, and forgive me if I get the phrasing wrong, because it was a while ago in my head, because I've had to speak since then, which of course makes my brain explode. So now you said something about the fact that you were generating an avatar that had the appearance of the culture that you were assigning, that you were presenting to, if you like, for the audience. The thing that I've read about synthetic avatars and so on is actually the AI bias. So it's actually the idea that the content that it's learned from actually might not be truly indicative of the fullness of a modern culture today. So I just wonder how you're getting around that and how you're implementing that into your system so that you're not creating stereotypes of what AI thinks a culture looks like. How are you navigating that?
Yeah, and that's a really good question and concern. So that particular decision, I wouldn't trust AI to make. So I was using a tool that just allows you to pick from different avatars, rather than it picking the avatar for me. I went through a whole long sort of like list I was able to select from and then use my own judgment. Obviously, I just put that together for a webinar or brief training session on how to run rapid experiments to make a business case for AI. If that was something that would go into production, I would always recommend to get feedback, to test that, to see whether that actually lands with the audience. Because as you're saying, bias is a huge issue when it comes to AI. And I would also actually, when you talking about on-screen avatars, I was leading a prototyping project at Sky where we looked at using a sign language avatar presenter on the screen to translate content into BSL and Makaton in real time for sign users. And there was so much we learned around the appearance of the avatar, whether it should show emotions or not, whether it should be more human or avatar-like. So for 3 months, we were just testing and getting feedback. And that's really what I would recommend to avoid bias.
It's interesting you mentioned that, actually. I don't know if you've been onto, if you're in the UK, if you've been onto Paddington Station in London, they actually have fully automated AI avatars. They're built on real world human people, but the AI it's actually driven by AI, so that any announcement can now be replicated in sign language, which is really useful.
That's really useful. Based on that use case and what you mentioned around a duty of care, Ben, when it comes to our own industry, talking about the synthetic avatars, the synthetic creators on YouTube raking in money that you mentioned, Brett. I think that one of the interesting elements which we usually kind of try to navigate and understand what position we have in the world as an organization at Papercup is that job creation aspect. So, for instance, Mel, you talked about, and as well as you, Ben, what you managed to do with those use cases was specific projects that wouldn't have been possible otherwise, within that time frame and potentially within that budget, which is usually what we come across. And luckily, we're in a position that from a AI localization aspect, we can tackle majority of projects that people would have not been able to do because of turnaround time and cost. So we're essentially tackling this suppressed demand that just cannot be served in other ways. At the same time, there was a very interesting article in The Economist talking about the use of AI in localization, all forms of localization, not just video, text, all that kind of good stuff. And in that space, it's been used widely for a very long time on text translation side of things. And among surveys between these translation experts, it was a large number of respondents. They found that most of them are actually very excited about it, because even though the cost per word of translation for them has gone down because AI does the first pass and they do the human second pass, their volume has gone up to make up for it. So essentially that kind of enabler for them to do their job more efficiently hasn't so far created too much disparity between, you know, the jobs and roles aspect of things, which is very positive to hear in terms of how it's being adopted. And kind of hand in hand with that duty of care in terms of where we're applying AI in the world of video, more specifically, I think is definitely an interesting topic to talk about. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything else to add to my ramblings, or if they've seen any other areas talking about that job displacement when AI is used in video.
I can certainly add to that. It was Mel actually who was talking about the synthetic avatars, which just today I saw someone post on LinkedIn about this post is completely synthetic. ChatGPT wrote the script. I trained a video and audio avatar to present as me, and it created a whole video that was completely synthetic. And then it could, based on the use of language and intonation, then be able to change the voice and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really fascinating. I think we'll get to a point where it allows us to operate at scale more quickly, like what you were saying, like what Ben was saying, like what Mel was saying. I think it is creating new jobs because there's all these data automation companies that are springing up now, which are the companies that basically are employing people to double check and qualify the content that's been used, the data, to train models. So that's generated a whole lot of new jobs from entry level all the way up to C-suite. It does come into that, and it has been rattling around in my head that data is so important that is used to train these models. So if a company doesn't have it internally, they're going to be going to companies who do have them. And I think everyone's right that it's going to be about how accurate is it, but also how does it reflect a true multicultural, diverse, inclusive kind of world that we live in. And that is going to be the content that will matter the most. I think we'll see AI coming in and used at a very low level, like Ben saying, used in the announcements, and you'll see it's already used in chatbots and things like that. But I still see there's CGI didn't replace filmmaking, and I don't think AI is going to replace video anytime soon. It's just going to mean it can evolve, and there'll be a base level of stuff that we no longer have to worry about: background replacement, audio ducking, getting rid of ums and ahs, taking a whole bunch of raw footage and creating a rough cut. All this, I predict by next year, is just going to be standard in all your video software offerings.
I think it's about learning a new tool. You know, a friend of mine is sort of very well versed in sort of coding and is a VFX guy and animator and so on, and he very succinctly puts it that AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, and that's the crux of it. You know, unfortunately, that fails when, you know, that sentence works for 90% of jobs until where you get to is actors and performers and voiceover artists, where actually, you know, you're then looking at, depending on the case, and we can get into my my fairly strong feelings on the difference between synthetic voice cloning and performance, but you know, we're looking at use cases where, you know, if the performance is allowed to be, you know, fairly staid and not really expressing huge intellect and emotion, then yes, you can get away with it. But if what you're looking for is for an AI to, you know, really give you Shakespeare, you're probably not going to get it. I mean, you know, Tom Hanks, as anybody who was at my MIPCOM speech will remember, I'm a big fan of Tom Hanks. But I completely disagree with him when he said that you know, he's obviously signed his digital likeness away to Metaphysic, and his voice and so on. And he said, yeah, great, I can still be performing, you know, in 30 years time. And I thought, no, you can't. No, your likeness will be driven by somebody else who may or may not have an, you know, 1/8 of your skill. So, but do you really want to be assigning your performance, your digital likeness to somebody who isn't able to deliver the performance that you're able to deliver, to really understand the subtext, to really drive that dialogue, that has the emotional range that you do? You know, fortunately, we are talking about Tom Hanks and not Nick Cage, but you know, we're that's unnecessarily harsh. I love Con Air. So you know, we're looking at that as being, you know, that is not the same. Having one's digital likeness is not the same as having one perform.
And
I
can I ask a question? Are you across the recent SAG and Astra deal that was done in the States?
Across it at the time, but please do, there may be bits of it that I've missed, but I was yeah. I was at the time.
You would be in a perfect position to talk to it, because the summaries I've heard is a lot of it, the only way they could get the deal through is basically have levels of consent with actors to go, do you consent to this? Do you consent to that?
Yeah,
if we replace you for a moment or redub you, if you fail your morality clause, we can continue making the film, all this kind of stuff. I'm just curious. Yeah. You seem well placed to kind of talk to some of that stuff.
Yeah, and so all of the conversations we had at Equity a few weeks ago all boiled down to that idea of informed consent. And it's not just consent, it's informed consent. It's about really knowing what you're signing yourself up for. And the concerns, and rightfully so, whether the big studios at the time, and we could obviously talk about this for hours, so I shall try and get this quite tight. But the main concerns was actually from supporting artists at the time, who were going to be body scanned and lose all their digital rights in one go. So, you know, at that point, you know, let's imagine somebody who's starting out and they've got their first job as a supporting artist, but actually, you know, they're the next Tom Cruise. Suddenly, you know, they're going to discover in 20 years' time that, oh, actually, Warner Brothers has been using my image and my performance rights for the last 20 years, and now I'm, you know, my skill is worth nothing because they've assigned me to 23 roles that I'd have never done in a million years. So it's about losing one's ability to have a livelihood, and that's all fine. Looking, you know, the big world cases there where you say, right, what happens if actually they become really successful? But you know, it doesn't matter if they don't become, you know, this idea of successful, successful is just being able to earn a living, and not have to work 14 jobs, which is what half the acting community unfortunately have to do anyway, given the value that is put on them. But actually, if you're looking at jobbing actors, they really need those smaller jobs where do we really want to lose half the industry just because it's cheaper? And this is where the broadcast industry, and the film industry has a duty of care. For the last I could say 5 years, the broadcast industry has been getting more and more risk averse, and that has beginning to reflect in its budgets and the way that it will spend money. And we look at how Channel 4 are currently sort of digging down and saying, nope, just no money. Well, of course, all the production companies are now being forced into a position where they have to cut costs. And this is all coming at the wrong time, because if you push somebody into a corner, well, they will do anything they can do to survive. That's animalistic. It's just the way it is. And so now we're being put in this position where you're saying, right, there is no money, but here's a nice way of doing things cheaper. Where are your ethics now? And you go, right, but this is where we've got to hold steady and go, right, we can't just. It's fine asking a cinematographer to do something for 600 quid a day instead of 900 quid a day, but it's a very different thing where you're saying, I could hire an actor, or I could just use this synthetic clone, which has cost me 20 quid. There's a very different dynamic there that needs to be discussed. And this is why it's an industry-wide conversation. It's not just about production companies or businesses trying to stay afloat. This is why we all need to come in on it at the same level and have proper conversations. And I'm really glad that certainly in the UK, the networks are all involved in the conversation. So that's really, really positive.
Thank you, Ben. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's all really good points, Ben. I think what is concerning in the UK is just the lack of regulation. So when we look at what the US is doing around copywriting and thinking about, copyrighted material, but also essentially protecting artists, they seem further ahead. Obviously, now Canada is launching a body of regulation for and around AI. And although that seems like the UK is talking a lot about it, and, Rishi Sunak obviously recently hosting the AI Safety Summit, it seems like a lot of talking, but not enough doing. And I think some of the aspects you mentioned around, but what is the value exchange going to be going forward, and rewarding artists, actors in the film industry? I have a good friend, and she was actually asked to provide a scan of her body so that her image can be reused. And she was offered £300 for taking her livelihood away in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that is just absolutely shocking. And I think there's a real gap when it comes to really thinking about, okay, what is that going to look like for humans, for our economy going forward? Because, we're seeing a shift in skills. And I think what you mentioned earlier, Ben, around writing these prompts, obviously prompt engineering is a really highly valued skill set now, but then not everyone wants to be a prompt engineer. And then, sorry, my final point is from an organizational point of view, because that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I think organizations need to move really fast to upskill their workforce. So I think I saw a diagram earlier on LinkedIn where someone actually listed out all the competencies that will be needed within an organization. And that will be things like system competencies around using these tools, decision-making competencies. So someone who really understands the data and then is able to make the right decisions, ethical competencies. Organizations need to have the right governance frameworks in place. They need to think about things like bias, data retention, and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure organizations are actually set up to shift towards, upskilling people to acquire those skills.
I think to sort of answer one first and comment on another. In terms of legislation, you're absolutely right. The UK is slow, but so is Europe. Actually, just generally, Europe is a little bit slower. Whether we're actually slower than the US partners, I'm not sure. I certainly think that the Americans have done a better job of being loud about it. Whereas I think the UK definitely is sort of, in terms of government legislation, definitely behind, but who's surprised there? But actually industry bodies, it takes a while to move all the industry, or move the industry into one room to discuss recognize the problem and then actually work out a way of doing it. We've made a huge amount of progress over the last 2 months. I would say as an industry, I feel that we've made a really good few steps. Certainly the last 6 weeks, even we now know what we're facing. We now know the direction in which we want to go, and we are looking to help the industry partners and industry bodies in sort of moving through the AI landscape. And I think that's really positive. And I think sort of by the end of January, maybe by the end of February, we'll be at a really good place that actually we can actually hold people's hands and go, no, do you know what, this is where we are and how we can help. And then to your other point about upskilling, and actually the idea that we need lots of AI competencies. You're absolutely right. But what we should also remember is the fact that you and I both have said, just on this webinar, that we haven't trusted AI to do the jobs that we needed to do completely, in the way that we've discussed, sort of visual bias in the avatars, and in fact fact checking in the ChatGPT stuff that I was doing. And this sort of plays to a larger thing, which is that actually human intervention is not just needed, it's essential, because nobody is ever going to trust AI to deliver something without it going wrong. There's again a post on LinkedIn I saw that somebody who created a Nike advert completely out of generative prompts using Runway ML. It did a job. Is Nike really going to sign off on something that somebody's just sort of stuck a few prompts in? No, of course they haven't. I mean, there could be all sorts of issues behind that nobody has really thought of. So there are always going to be, and of course there was the other famous phrase that's now come around, which is that don't worry, if we're all going to lose our jobs to AI, that means that the clients actually need to know what it is they want. And as we all know, clients don't know what they want ever. So we're certainly going to always need to be around to help them work out what it is that they want. So there is all that future, which brings it back to the fact that AI is a tool, but what amazing tools are out there, and I don't think we've necessarily touched on that just yet. So I'll shut up.
And that's a really good segue. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks very much. You're welcome.
There was a couple of questions that came in that kind of relate to that, and maybe this is more in your camp, James. One of them was around talking about, so there was talks of synthetic YouTube creators, but that aside, surely this plethora of new tools available for the long-tail creators, not your big guys who potentially have bigger budgets, but surely for the more for the majority of the creator economy, this is a boon. And the second part of that, and this is based on a point that you mentioned to me last time we spoke, was some of these creators now potentially even switching to other forms of content, such as animation, which is another format that we haven't really discussed. So what's your views on that in terms of how the creator economy is kind of utilizing AI? And if there are some of those use cases you can elaborate on that brings in animation, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Well, the creator economy, like other creative industries, unfortunately has a power law. So we've talked a lot about traditional film and TV, and we see the same things kind of true for social platforms. Is the creators at the top generate the most revenue and get the most audience. And so there are structural challenges there, right? To building out a middle class of creators and helping kind of emerging creators find their audience and monetize more effectively. AI is part of the solution, right? I mean, I think we need better, resources and support for emerging and mid-sized creators, but certainly I think it's democratizing access to content creation and distribution, and that is empowering, right? I mean, the strides we've made over the last 10, 15 years have been incredible. So imagine what we'll be able to achieve in the next 10 to 15 years. As it relates to animation, there certainly are people innovating in that space, so tools to help streamline the animation process, make it accessible to those who aren't the most talented designers or graphic illustrators. Just about anyone can kind of create content now, whether that's live action or animation. And so, I think that will be a way for creators to extend their brand, right? So maybe leverage their likeness in a way that extends their audience without requiring them to give away, their likeness rights per se. So one example of that I've seen is Ryan's Toys Reviews, right? He launched an animation brand however many years ago. And part of that is, he's not going to be a kid forever. And so creating this animated universe extends the brand and allows them to, create content for kids that will endure. But the other part of it is there's only so many hours in a day, and right, a creator can't be on screen all the time. And so if you create, an animated likeness that can do that opens up more possibilities. So, I think we'll see more of that happening in the future, especially in the kids and family space.
Amazing.
James, what do you think of the purely synthetic influencers and creators that are emerging at the moment?
Yeah. So we had VTubers, right? Virtual YouTubers, virtual influencers now on all platforms. There's one, I think primarily on Instagram, a Spanish virtual creator who's earning over $12,000 a month, right? So clearly there's a need for this. There's like an interest among fans. And so whether that's brands adapting their characters to become virtual influencers like Mattel has done with Barbie, or if it's things like Little Michaela, right? Like these completely new generated virtual creators. It's interesting to see that people are still able to develop a parasocial bonding relationship with them just as they would a human creator, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if 5-10 years from now, some of the most popular digital talents, right, or global celebrities are virtual, right? I think, given the rise of anime and people spending more time in playing video games or embracing the metaverse, I fully expect that we're going to see more and more virtual characters becoming popular.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing.
That's really interesting. I recently saw an article about a brand that replaced a human influencer with a synthetic influencer, and they were saying that it's a lot easier because often influencers can have quite big personalities and it saves them costs. And so I was like, and they showed pictures obviously of the avatar virtual influencer, and I was thinking, wow, now brands don't have to bother anymore, make the effort to work with humans. And all humans are complex, so
Sure.
we need to learn to actually get the best out of each other, but they just use synthetic ones instead. And anyway, that just raised a lot of questions.
It's less risky, right? Creators as human beings can say or do just about anything, and that opens up risk for the brand. You don't want to be associated with a creator saying something offensive in the past or potentially in the future, right? So if you have full control over the brand messaging, it's a lot safer of a bet for a brand.
So it's about control. Interesting.
We don't want to sidetrack you, Amir, from I know you've got questions you want us to get through. Was there questions from the people out there or other topics you want to cover?
I think it's just been fascinating to organically see where the conversation drives us, and I think we've tackled a lot of the questions in the comments. We have a few minutes left, and maybe we can use this as kind of parting wisdom and food for thought of what's coming around for next year. One particular area we haven't necessarily talked about is maybe we can go around and maybe highlight one or two specific use cases which you don't necessarily see live in play today, which you anticipate or you're potentially excited about seeing in the future where AI plays in the video space. So just going around the room, starting with yourself, Brett, as your kind of food for thought for 2024.
I think it's going to be, for me, thinking about social video, it's going to penetrate every element of the work that you do, whether it's the video content creation or the analytics or the reporting, community management. You can go through every single aspect and there will be AI tools that you can leverage and use either built into the social platforms or that you can use from third parties. And I was doing some research this week into some of them. And it's amazing because for me, as someone who's not a video editor, suddenly I can have access to the power of certain tools that I never had access before. But then that frees up, that just raises the bar, because if the bar suddenly is here of like the level of quality we expect, suddenly what I'm most interested in is what is everyone going to do with these tools? Because that is where the lateral creative innovation is going to come out of that we aren't even seeing right now.
Going to Mel, what are you excited about where you see adoption of AI in video in the future, which we don't see it today?
Yeah, so definitely, as touched on before, advanced AI for accessibility when it comes to video. As I said, I've got some experience working in that area, and that just really excites me, whether that is, you know, speech recognition software, or applications where people can interact with content, especially when, you know, they have got limitations to do that in traditional ways, making that more exclusive. Or it is things like, you know, using object recognition or text to image AI to provide more accessibility when it comes to interacting with images based on just audio or text, or translating that into audio. And then, you know, also, I guess, different, like just real-time transcription tools around that. As I was mentioning, you know, real-time signing, I think, especially when it comes to brand reputation, thinking about large media and broadcasting companies, I think that is just really important to see that brands are dedicated to making their content fully inclusive. So I think there's like a huge opportunity. And also just thinking about the image capabilities when it comes to video of AI, that it could just like that completely change the color scheme. So if someone struggles, you know, seeing colors, for example, I think, yeah, that's really exciting to potentially see that really opens up opportunities to engage a broader range of audiences with video.
I love that. Thank you so much. James?
I think we're going to see more and more video being created, right? If you think back to 15 years ago, the hardware required, lights, camera equipment, tapes, right, was expensive. It was slow. It was clunky. Then you had all this software, but it was fragmented, right? You needed all these different tools to put something together. Now anyone can create video with one of these, right? It's like all of the hardware and software is in the palm of your hand and on your person at all times. So that's made anyone essentially a video creator. And the barriers, not just technological barriers, but the cultural barriers have come down. It's just normal, right? Not everyone created and shared content on YouTube, but most people do on TikTok, right? And fast forward 5-10 years from now, younger generations are growing up and video is native. It's how we do messaging, right? On Snapchat or other platforms, even like WhatsApp. It's become, you know, part of culture, how we communicate and share information, news, memes. But it's also become kind of the primary way that we consume, educate ourselves and interact, right, through like video content like this. So we've seen, you know, the percentage of internet traffic, the bandwidth that's dedicated to video has grown to 65% as of last year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 80 or 90% in the future, because AI is further reducing those barriers and making it even more commonplace for people to create video.
And Ben, last to you.
I think that certainly looking at it from my angle, I think we're going to experience a greater availability of legal indemnification for generative video. So, you know, at the moment, you've obviously got software platforms like like Runway, who haven't announced where their training data actually comes from, which means that the broadcast industry are all very reluctant to actually use it in anything commercial, because there's a chance that that's going to come around and bite you. Same as with generative image creation. Getty obviously has their thing with Stable Diffusion at the moment in the courts, but then Getty have also brought out their platform that offers legal indemnification, which I believe is the only one in the world at the moment that's done that. There's a chance that they might bring out a generative video version that does the same job, and suddenly as soon as there is a video platform, a generative video platform that offers some form of ethical certainty that this data hasn't been scraped and stolen from a load of creatives, the broadcast industry can start using it, and that will be a game changer. So whoever brings that in first and has a usable UI will change the future, and I think that will probably come next year to some level, and I can't wait for that, because I keep being asked for it, and I have plenty of ideas of what to do with it.
Love that. I mean, actually, I believe we have a whole bunch of people from Getty in the audience today, so hopefully they can get in touch with you, telling you what's coming next. We have 2 questions and we have 2 minutes, so I'm just going to do a quick fire round. One of them is towards you, Mel, directly. How would you tackle conversations with a media company where it takes 12 months or plus to see ROI when investing in AI? So how do you tackle those conversations?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's what I ran a webinar on recently, so I'm very happy to send you
Drop the link.
Yeah, I'll drop the link. You will hopefully find that helpful. But first of all, start to, get testing, essentially, because a lot of it takes a long time when you implement a system and run large, massive programs within gnarly big organizations. But what is the smallest step you can take? And rather than just talking about what you want to do, start testing and experimenting using the tools out there. Obviously, don't put it straight into production, because, there's all sorts of, ethical concerns, obviously, and compliance. But show them, first of all, what the return on investment could be, and then create a really robust business case to do that, like conduct a robust cost-benefit analysis, for example, because once companies see that they can save money and can drive efficiencies, it's a completely different conversation. And in the link I'm going to send you, I'm in that webinar, I'm talking about how you can create a robust business case within less than half an hour.
Love that. Thank you. We'll add the link into the follow-up when we send out the on-demand version as well, so people can get access to it. And this is for anyone who wants to answer it. How will AI affect audience data gathering by distribution platforms? Will the best content influence or best audience drive the narrative and direction?
Do you mean, I'm not sure what that question means.
I think it's I believe it's the Spotify conundrum, right? Where certain big artists tend to dominate the streaming just by default, because initially they have the pull, more people listen to them, and then when it comes to recommendation, the recommendation favors the one that has the biggest momentum behind it, because it becomes this vicious circle where big guys keep on staying big and small guys don't get through. I'm assuming that's what's alluding to. Would it be around content influence or audience size influence?
I think it's a really fascinating question. I always think about the long game, that I think if there's enough groundswell of people demanding something, companies will respond. So if it is like all I see in my YouTube feed, my Spotify, my Netflix is the same things, and all those companies are equally trying to solve personalized recommendation, because they know it's a way to make people satisfied, the way to keep them on the platform, and the way to make money. So I do think it will come. I just think we are going to go through evolutions of, we're in this bubble at the moment, that's going to burst. We're going to consolidate. We're going to work out all these teething problems. Then we're going to start layering on the proper ethics of it, diversity, inclusion, and as well as true personalization. that is the end game. If anyone can get that, you're done.
I love that. I think perfect parting words. Thank you so much to all our panelists, Ben, James, Brett, Mel. It's been so fantastic to have you here. Thank you. Thanks for all the attendance and for anyone watching in the future. As I mentioned, we'll send that roundup as well as the on-demand version to you panelists as well as the audience as well. So feel free to share it with anyone that you wish. Thank you so much again. Good evening, good morning to you, James. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.